What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. And this one is my team selection for game week 6, and my wildcard is active. So I'm going to run you through what my current draft looks like and also talk through possible changes that I could make as well. And I'll quickly run you through how I did in game week 5. So as always, if you enjoyed the video and find it useful, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and check out Fantasy Football Hub using the links in the description below. Especially if you're on wildcard this week, you can get your team rated for free, and if you want to use all the other tools, there is 50% off at the moment, which is ending this week. All the links you need in the description below. Otherwise, let's get into it. So let's start with how I did in game week 5, and it was a pretty good game week for me. I finished on 71 points, which was enough to take me from 1.9 to 1.3 million, and it's always nice to get a green arrow. Now, that's not quite the overall rank that I would like to be at right now, but it's also not anything to worry about. I actually looked at my team selection videos from last year. This is my game week 8 one, so I was reviewing game week 7, and I was 1.2 million. So I actually started last season better than this one, but I still fell down to 1.2 million after the 7th game week, and then finished in the top 50k. So I really would try and stress right now, if you think you've started the season badly, there's a lot more points to be played for. Lots of people ahead of you would have already played chips as well. It's nothing to panic about. So 1.3 million is not amazing, but it's certainly not terrible either. I did make a mistake this week though, and that was playing João Pedro over Smith Rowe. And I'm annoyed about it, or I'm annoyed at myself about it, because I said in the final thoughts video that João Pedro had a chance of being benched, right? Not that it was likely or guaranteed, but that there was a high chance of it happening because he hadn't featured in the previous squad at all. We knew he'd been training, but Hertzler said they won't risk him. And then I played him anyway ahead of Smith Rowe, who was perfectly reasonable to start against Newcastle. So that was a mistake and a loss of 7 points. There's nothing about luck there. It just wasn't the right decision. I also went a lot last week back and forth between bringing in Salah and wildcarding in 6, or ignoring Salah, not wildcarding, and captaining Haaland. So I bought Salah in for Saka. Saka got 4 points before going off at half-time. Salah only got 6, and then obviously captained into 12. And then obviously Haaland got 9. So I haven't gone back and worked it out completely. I don't think I'm massively down on points by bringing Salah in, but I'm definitely not up either. And obviously that's forced me to wildcard in game week 6 because I want to bring my Arsenal players back in like Saka and also triple up overall. For what it's worth, when we go through the team in a minute, I still think there are benefits to wildcarding in 6 anyway. And I don't think that I can say bringing in Salah for captaincy against Bournemouth was a mistake. It definitely looked better on paper than the Arsenal game, but it didn't work out, and these things can happen. So Smith Rowe on the bench, a mistake. Salah, not a mistake, but it was quite a close call, and maybe on another week I would have gone a different way. Otherwise, Henderson, 9 points against Man United, decent clean sheet. Trent, quite lucky to get an 11-pointer because Kelleher basically bailed him out towards the end, but we know he's capable of that. Konza, 9 points as well, scored. Pedro Porro, 2 points. A little bit annoying, but actually, I think Porro's done okay for me because I got him in game week 1. I only wanted to play him in 3 game weeks, which were 1, 2, and 5. So Leicester away, Everton at home, Brentford at home. And he's returned in 2 of the 3. So actually, he's done okay. I was always, well, not always, but he was always a potential to be benched against Newcastle away and Arsenal at home, which is what I did. And he blanked in both of those games. So I think people have been a bit frustrated with Porro, but I actually think he's done okay for me. Rodgers finally got returns, 2 assists, 3 bonus points. That was excellent. I don't think it's necessarily a sign of things to come that he's going to get multiple returns every week, but he's still a great 8th attacker. Obviously, Salah captain 12, like I said. Fernandes and Eze, the bane of my life in FPL at the moment. They both, I wouldn't say they had massive amounts of chances in that game, but I watched it and both of them had a very good chance to score. And on another day, you might have returns from both of them. It just so happens that I didn't get returns from either. And it's really frustrating because if you look at the expected goal involvement for Fernandes versus someone like Diaz, they're identical pretty much for the whole season so far. But it just so happens that Diaz has scored 5 goals and Fernandes has got 0. And Diaz's expected goal involvement data is more skewed towards XG rather than expected assists, but still, to only have 1 return from Eze and 1 return from Fernandes after 5 weeks, that does feel a little bit unlucky. I'm not saying they were amazing picks, but they've been frustrating. We'll see if they make the wildcard draft in a minute. João Pedro, 1 point off the bench, frustrating. Calvert-Lewin, 2 points, whatever. I don't mind that. It was to fund Salah, and the other option was Vardy anyway. So 71 points, 1.3 million. I'm quite happy with how things have gone so far. Let's look at the wildcard. So let's start, as always, with the goalkeepers and defenders. And the first player that I have to talk about is David Raya, because he wasn't in the Arsenal squad last night for the Carabao Cup game. And they tweeted to say that he missed out with a thigh injury. So he is a doubt going into the Leicester game in game week 6. And he has been yellow flagged. The reason that he's still in my squad is that I just don't trust Mikel Arteta. And I suspect that he's probably going to be absolutely fine. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong at all, because we've all seen that video going around social media of him limping after the Man City game. But I'm just not convinced it's enough to keep him out of Premier League games, which is so much more important than Carabao Cup ones. It is a risk, because I've got Fabianski on the bench as a non-playing 4 million goalkeeper. So if Raya doesn't play, I've got no goalkeeper whatsoever. But I want to wait and see what happens on Friday. What does Arteta say? What do the training photos show? And does any news come out? Because if Raya is fine for game week 6, I definitely want him in my team. For what it's worth, Arteta probably won't give us any indication of whether he's fit, and he probably won't be in the training photos. And at that point, I'll have to switch the squad around a little bit. I'll either go to Ederson and find money to get Saliba in my defence, or I'll just go for Flecken and put Saliba in, right? One of the ways I'll figure it out. But right now, I really want to go for Raya, because long term, I just think Arsenal's fixtures are so good. A double up just looks amazing. The other thing to quickly point out as well, I looked on Raya's page on Transfer Market for last season. Someone pointed this out to me. Where is it? Carabao Cup games. He wasn't in the squad for either of the games last year either. Now, the first game for Arsenal last season was against Brentford, and people will rightly point out that he was on loan. But for the Carabao Cup, the rules are different to the Premier League. So Arsenal asked Brentford for permission for him to play. Brentford said yes, and then Arsenal still didn't put him in the squad. And then he wasn't in the squad for the West Ham game either. Now, people, again, will point out that last year they had Ramsdale. This year, Neto was cup-tied, and that they had to play a 16-year-old. So it is a little bit strange that if Raya was fit, that he wasn't in the squad. But also, it was a game against Bolton. So I'm not sure him missing out yesterday is a massive indicator that he misses out on the weekend. The West Ham game, by the way, was on the 1st of November. That was 3 games before Arsenal had to play Brentford in the league. So possibly he just wanted to give Ramsdale minutes before that Brentford game. But I just don't see it, because Raya played 2 league games after that Carabao Cup game. So I think he missed out last year due to rest, because it was early in the season. I've got a feeling it's exactly the same this year, but we'll have to wait and see. Right now he's in the squad. I've got a double up with Gabriel. He's an absolute lock for me. I got him at 6 million. He's now gone to 6.1. He's the biggest goal threat in that Arsenal defence. Some people have said now teams know about it. They might like double mark him, and Saliba might get more room. It could happen, but teams have known that Gabriel is a massive goal threat for a long time. It doesn't stop him. So he is definitely in. And I think with the Arsenal fixtures, like they've got a little bit of a dodgy run, 9 to 11. Liverpool at home, Newcastle away, Chelsea away. But after that, the fixtures are pretty good for a long time. They're just going to be set and forget for me. If I go for this draft, I just don't see me changing Raya or Gabriel for a long time. It's a lot of money, but I think it's probably going to be worth it. Trent is currently in, but he's not as much of a lock as Gabriel. I think I really want to include him if I can, because he's been so attacking and Liverpool defence has been decent. And again, it's kind of a longer term play. Yes, we've got transfers to deal with issues that come up and to target fixtures and stuff like that. But on a wildcard, the thinking should be a little bit longer term, especially when I'm using it so early in the season. There's a long time now until I get to wildcard again. I've got to think about future game weeks. And I look at Liverpool's fixtures, and okay, 2 away games, then Chelsea at home, Arsenal away. It's not amazing, but away to Wolves, away to Palace is not the end of the world. Then after Arsenal, you've got home games against Brighton and Villa. Then it's Southampton away. City at home in 13 is tough. But basically, there's not really too many games there where I'm going to be worried about playing Trent. He's just such an easy option just to leave in. And if it does get to the point where he needs to go, then so be it. But I'd almost rather start with him and then have to transfer him out than the other way around. So I might move him to Robertson and just save the money and still have a Liverpool defender in there, even though he's not as attacking. I might just go somewhere else completely, but I think it's quite likely that Trent makes the final draft. At the moment, I've got Rico Lewis in. I've got a feeling I'm going to get cold feet on that by the time we get to the deadline. I get it. He's 4.7 million. the fixtures that Man City have got coming up really do scream clean sheets. Like Newcastle away, Fulham at home, Wolves away, Southampton at home, Bournemouth away. There's a good chance of clean sheets in any of those games. And at 4.7 million, he's potentially amazing value. And again, it's probably better to start with him and then move off. But I just know he's a transfer waiting to happen. And is that really where I want to be spending my transfers? Bearing in mind, I'm only going to have one from game week 7. I don't have any saved up. Like moving Rico Lewis to a different 4.5 later on is just not all that fun. Like part of me almost thinks I should make a downgrade somewhere else and just get Vardiol because his minutes are probably going to be better. And also, after the Bournemouth game, like Brighton away, Spurs at home, Liverpool away just aren't that great anyway. If you could guarantee me that he starts all of the next 5, then I just take the punt because he is quite attacking and Man City defence is so good. But we shouldn't forget that other defenders can get points as well. And I think sometimes, I know it sounds stupid, but we get so fixated on one player. It's like they're the only one that's ever going to score points. And so I've got Rico Lewis because on paper, having a Man City defender for 4.7 looks great, but I don't know if I'm massively convinced. Now, I don't have another premium defender. The 2 on the bench are Mykolenko, who's 4.3 million for Everton, and then Greaves at Ipswich, who's probably one of the best 4 million defenders right now. Mykolenko is yellow flagged, but there's reports going around on Twitter that he's back now, so hopefully Sean Dyche will tell us that in the press conference. And also Branthwaite is back as well. So Everton defence has not been great, but the fixtures are decent. And I think they'll be stronger with Mykolenko and Branthwaite in particular in that team. And what's quite nice is when I run this wildcard through the My Team Tour on Fantasy Football Hub, as always, links in the description below to get signed up, especially if you're on wildcard this week. Very handy. You can sign up monthly or yearly with 50% off, which is ending this week, by the way. The nice thing about Mykolenko and Greaves, and don't get me wrong, right, you don't necessarily want to play them unless you absolutely have to, but they cover Lewis really well. So let's say that I go for Lewis and he turns out terrible and he just never starts. Well, in game week 6, I've got Mykolenko against Crystal Palace at home. In game week 7, I could play Mykolenko against Newcastle at home or Greaves against West Ham away. That's not ideal, but not world-ending or anything like that. Then game week 8, it's Ipswich away for Mykolenko or Everton at home for Greaves. In game week 9, it's Fulham at home for Mykolenko. In game week 10, it's Leicester at home for Greaves or Mykolenko Southampton away. So because those cheap defenders cover Lewis so well, it pushes me more towards taking the risk, which is why he's in my team. But I don't know if I'm going to go for it by the deadline. The alternative, by the way, if I don't want to spend any more money, is to go for someone like Aina, I should say, instead of Lewis, who's only 4.5. So that saves me 0.2 million. And then instead of Mykolenko at 4.3, I get Colwell, who's also 4.5. So Lewis and Mykolenko is the same price as Aina and Colwell. I think Chelsea and Forest defences are going to be pretty good, and they rotate quite nicely. It's not a perfect rotation, but it's pretty decent. And Aina can be slightly attacking. He's not as attacking as Moreno, but I think he's more nailed on. So that's the alternative. So in this structure, that's the 2 options, Mykolenko and Lewis or Aina and Colwell. Unless I downgrade an attacker or Trent Alexander-Arnold, that's the kind of money I'm currently spending on defence. So let's move on to the midfield, and Bukayo Saka is my 3rd Arsenal player alongside Gabriel and Raya, and he's pretty much locked in. I know some people were worried about the fact that he got subbed at half-time against Man City, but that looks to have just been tactical, and any fears have been alleviated because he started last night against Bolton in the Carabao Cup and got 70 minutes. And I don't think that's a massive worry for his minutes of the weekend because, as I've just said, he only played 45 against City. So Leicester at home, Southampton at home, Bournemouth away, great option, definitely going to be in the team. And the thing I like about Saka, I've mentioned the Arsenal fixtures 9 to 11 where they play Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea, but for an attacker, they're not as bad as a defender. And he's never going to be a massive worry for me. If I get to game week 9 and nothing else has gone wrong with my team and I got a spare transfer, maybe I sell him to a City attacker or, I don't know, Son or someone like that. If not, I'm more than happy to keep him. And the fixtures from 12 onwards are just really good. So Saka is definitely in for me. Luis Diaz is in the team. I'm probably just going to have to admit defeat on that one. The thing that kind of swung it is last night. So actually, I created these graphics around 3 or 4 p.m. yesterday. And then I had to change them this morning because Diaz got a full rest for Liverpool. It was Darwin, Jota, Gakpo and Chiesa that started. So not only that, but obviously Mascara is now injured for Wolves as well. So that just makes them defensively weaker. And then I watched the Man United game and I just thought I can't keep putting myself through owning Bruno Fernandes. And the thing is, I still think he's not a bad pick going forward because although you can say he's out of form and he's not playing well, those things change quickly. And as I always say, when does form start? When does it end? No one ever has a really good answer for that. So things could change for Fernandes, but I'm just not sure I'm prepared to put myself through it. And the fact that Diaz missed out completely yesterday means he will start against Wolves. He may only get 70 minutes, but we've already seen what he can do. And then, yes, they got Champions League midweek, but Gakpo could just start that again, like he did in the first Champions League game. And then Diaz plays against Palace. I still think it's not massively likely that I keep Diaz longer term. And part of the reason I've got money in the bank is so I can go to Fernandes in game week 8 if I want to, because Diaz should rise again soon. And once he does that, I've got the money to go back to Fernandes. But I think for now, I just take him as the short-term option and then just worry about it later. The Chelsea game, by the way, in game week 8 is after the international break, but it's on Sunday. So I suspect Diaz will be fine for that. And then Arsenal away is not great, but at that point I can just look at what's happened and decide whether I want to use a transfer to move him on, because 10, 11 and 12 are really nice fixtures for Liverpool. So Diaz is in at the moment. He's not a lock. I know he would be for a lot of people, but he's not for me. I'm not sure whether I would move him to Bruno Fernandes and just save that transfer later. But another option is to just downgrade Diaz to someone like Eze or a punt on Savio and spend that money on defence and just get Vardio instead of Lewis. So that's why Diaz is not a lock. It's not because I think he's a bad player, but there are other options that I could go for. But maybe I just roll with it for Wolves and then maybe actually get some points from that midfielder and then see if that feels good. And if it does, just keep him in the team. I don't know, but Diaz is in at the moment. In Burmo, absolute lock. I'm not going to go through any more detail other than he's nailed. Stats are good, penalties, great fixtures. Like, I think I'll go as far to say this. I think it would be insane to wildcard and not have in Burmo. And I know people don't want to talk about essential players and all that. In Burmo it's insane not to go with him on wildcard, in my opinion. Semenyo is in. I'm having slight doubts about him as an option. Not because I think he's bad, but a lot of it relies on the next two fixtures: Southampton away and Southampton at home, then Leicester away in 7. Because Arsenal at home, Villa away, City at home is not great, 8 to 10. The fixtures after that aren't bad again. I worry a little bit about 8 to 10. Like, could I just downgrade that position and spend the money elsewhere? Like, that's a possibility. Like Semenyo to Dibbling or Semenyo to Carvalho at Brentford and hope that he keeps playing. That would give me more money to, again, maybe go and get someone like Vardio instead of Lewis. But I still think for 5.6 he's decent. And I feel more comfortable with him in my team than someone like McNeil. And he has shot a lot. His minutes have been good. I think he's a decent option, but again, not a lock. Not like in Burmo and Saka. And then on the bench, I've got Morgan Rogers. By the way, part of the reason that I've considered maybe downgrading Semenyo is because I don't like the idea of benching Rogers. Like, I don't think he's going to be this amazing FPL option that gets a ton of returns, but the minutes have been so good so far. Like, do I really want to bench someone that's going to play 90 minutes again? Probably, against Ipswich. Not really. But then none of my other attackers also need to be benched either. And Ipswich fixtures are Aston Villa's fixtures are pretty good. Ipswich away, Man United at home, Fulham away, Bournemouth at home, next 4. So I could even put myself in a position where I downgrade Semenyo and just play Rodgers every week. Is that ideal? No, but it would give me a much better squad elsewhere. So it is a consideration. And I'll also say this, I'm finding this wildcard quite difficult. And I've got to say again, it's all because of FPL pricing. Sometimes I've wildcarded in the past, and I feel like the whole squad just picks itself, and it's so easy. There's not even really anything to think about. That is not the case. Like, I could end up with like 4 or 5 players different than what I've got right now. I think I'm pretty happy with how it looks, but it's not perfect. There is those thoughts of Diaz down to someone else, Lewis up to Vardio, just downgrade Semenyo completely and play Rodgers every week, and just take that spot as a cheap option in my 11. There's ways I can go for it, but right now that's how I'm setting up. And that midfield, apart from Diaz, is what I've had for a little while now. I've just had Fernandes instead of Diaz, but yeah, just admit defeat on that and probably just go for the Liverpool guy instead. And then up front, no surprises, Erling Haaland is in the squad, and that is where he's going to remain for the foreseeable future. And he's probably going to be my captain this week as well. I think on paper, Arsenal definitely have the better fixture, Leicester at home. But given how Newcastle are playing at the moment and how good Haaland has been, I just don't think I can go against it. I just don't think I've got it in me. And then next week, where obviously Saka has Southampton at home, Haaland's got Fulham at home. So I'm probably going to captain him then, and again against Wolves, and again against Southampton. So the next 4 weeks, captaincy-wise, probably quite a boring conversation, to be honest with you, but it is what it is. I just don't want to fight it. Solanke is in at the moment as well. I've basically tried to shift the funds around, which is how Lewis got into the team, to be able to have Trent, Diaz, or Fernandes plus Solanke. I'm not sure there's a massive need to have him for the next 2 game weeks against Man United away and Brighton away. They're okay fixtures, and the kind that if you owned a player and that's who they were about to play, you wouldn't worry about it. But I'm on wildcard, so I can target the fixtures in the short term a little bit more. But I still think as a long-term pick, he just looks decent. And again, I go back to game week 8 onwards. West Ham at home, Palace away, Villa at home, Ipswich at home. Really nice run. Then after City away, it's Fulham at home, Bournemouth away. So if Spurs can keep creating the amount of chances we know they can, their number 9 is going to score a lot of goals. And I just feel like at 7.5 million is a really decent price. I don't really have any thoughts about going for Jackson, then bringing Solanke in later, because like I said, in game week 7, I'm only going to have 1 transfer. I also don't particularly like taking an Arsenal defender out to go for Havertz instead. Havertz is a perfectly fine pick, but I'm really trying to set up without a huge amount of transfers in mind, because stuff will happen, right? Things will go wrong, and I want to concentrate on that. And so some players, they might not be ideal for the next game week or 2, like Solanke, but long term, they're pretty good. So he's in for now. The only player I think that would come in for him is Chris Wood. And again, to have that money to spend elsewhere. And that's going to be on my mind right until the deadline. Lots of these decisions are going to go down to the wire. But at the moment, Solanke's in. And I do like the prospect of what he might do going forward. And then my cheap forward is Calvert-Lewin. I just think there's too many doubts around João Pedro. Even if he's confirmed fit by Hertzler for this weekend, I just don't think I will go there. As I've said before, I think the Brighton fixtures coming up aren't as bad as they look. Like Chelsea away is not great, but Spurs at home, Newcastle away, Wolves at home, 7-9 are okay. But then you've got Liverpool away and City at home. And so I've got to the point with João Pedro where I think he is probably a really good value player for FPL. And once he comes back into my team, maybe in game week 12, he could be there for the foreseeable. But I just think with the doubts around him, you know, I'm not sure what Hertzler says is going to change my opinion that much. And the fixtures aren't great. I'd rather just go for an Everton attacker, even though that sounds crazy when you say it out loud, because their fixtures are just so good for a long time now. And Chris Wood is definitely a consideration versus Calvert-Lewin, because I think Forest are stronger than Everton. But they play Chelsea away in 7, which is not ideal when Calvert-Lewin's got Newcastle at home, followed by Ipswich away and Fulham at home. Newcastle at home in 7, Ipswich away in 8, then Fulham at home in 9. But also Calvert-Lewin's a bit cheaper. I picked him up at 5.9. Chris Wood is 6.1. And money is tight for these drafts. I know I've got a 0.4 in the bank, but as I've said, I might want to use that to go back to Bruno Fernandes. So that's the team as it stands right now. The rating it comes out to on Fantasy Football Hub is 91%. So I wish it was a little bit better, but I wonder if the flags are playing a bit of a part in that. If you want to get your team rating for free, I'll leave a link in the description below. And as always, if you want to sign up and use all the tools, there's 50% off at the moment. So it comes out pretty well. It looks good for the next few weeks. The rotations with Rodgers, Semenyo and Calvert-Lewin are decent enough. I've already explained that Mikalenko and Greaves cover Lewis as well. I think overall that looks pretty good. Let me know what you think in the comments below and give the video a like and hit that subscribe button. I'll tell you what though, let's just do a quick bit of tinkering and rambling for how the squad could look like instead. So this is the squad that I just went through, and I've just realised that I've actually got 0.5 million in the bank, not 0.4. And the reason for that is the squad that I'm carrying on the FPL page has Nicholas Jackson instead of Solanke, because he's already gone up in price this week, and I'm hoping he goes up again, because then I'll get to bank 0.1 million profit. But when I take him out and go for the draft I just showed you, then I've got 0.5. So that explains the mistake in other parts of the video. So one thing I could spend that money on is just simply Luis Diaz back to Bruno Fernandes. And I'm not completely ruling him out, but I don't think I can put myself through it, right? So let's just go back to the Diaz variant of this draft. And by the way, when I put Fernandez in, I'm basically left with 0 in the bank. Now, one consideration for me is just to get Vardio instead of Lewis. It's absolutely clear that Lewis could be amazing value compared to Vardio, but Vardio is a bit safer for minutes. I just think very often he's going to be in that team at left back. That would mean that I would need to free up 0.8 million. And one way to do that is to drop Diaz to Eze or Savio, is to drop Trent to Robertson, or is to drop Solanke to Chris Wood. That's probably the main ways that I would do it. I could drop Semenyo to a 4.8 million midfielder and possibly take a risk on someone like Carvalho, but I just don't think his minutes are guaranteed. I just don't know if I want to put myself in a position where I've got to play Rodgers every single week. But honestly, I feel like that would be the only weak spot in the team if I did that. Carvalho, Mikalenko and Greaves on the bench, and then pretty much you play Gabriel, Trent, Vardio every game and just play Rodgers as well because he does look like a good pick. So it is quite tempting, but I don't think that's the move that I would make. I think Trent down to Robertson, in theory, is quite nice because when they're both on the pitch, they're getting the same clean sheet points. Trent is obviously more attacking, but he does cost $1 million more. But then I go back to pre-season, and when I saw Trent's price at 7 million, it felt like an absolute bargain. And I probably shouldn't forget that. But I do think with this setup, I get to cover the Liverpool defence and also have Vardio. And the thing I like about having Vardio versus Lewis is that's a perfect jump off to go to Porro, who I do think I want back if I don't start with him in the squad. Because if you look at Man City's fixtures, the next 4 are good, right? And they're a good defence. They could keep clean sheets after that. But after Southampton at home in 9, you've then got 3 away games in 4 against Bournemouth, Brighton and Liverpool, all good attacking sides. And then game week 12 is Spurs at home. So the clean sheets from 10 to 13 are going to be much more difficult. And if you look at Porro's fixtures in that run, let me just bring the fixtures up here. They would have 3 home games against Villa, Ipswich and Fulham, and then the away game is Man City. So not ideal, but decent. He's nailed on, great attacking threat, etc. So I quite like that jump off from Vardio to Porro without really damaging the rest of the squad. But I don't know if I can get on board with dropping Trent. That's the problem. In theory, Robertson is good, but I don't know if I can get there by the deadline to think that's actually a good move. And of course, I can do it other ways, right? Luis Diaz would give me 7 million to spend. So that could be Eze or Savio. I'm a little bit tempted to go for Savio as a punt. Because I think if I go for Vardio, this is my current thoughts. If I go for Vardio, I'm a lot more confident in his minutes. So he's not necessarily as much of a risk or a transfer that I have to use. So if I look at that squad now, there's no players there that long term without injury are going to be massive problems. And so I can afford to spend a transfer on like Savio to Eze. Is that where I want to spend my transfer and get rid of Luis Diaz? I'm not sure. And then the other option is just to put Chris Wood in. And I think this is probably my favourite one because Chris Wood is on penalties. He's only 6.1 and the fixtures outside of that Chelsea away game are so good. But that's what I can... That's what I'm struggling with. I think Solanke is potentially brilliant. But how much better is he than Chris Wood? Which I know sounds stupid when you say it out loud. But I think it's a legit conversation to have. I think Chris Wood is just potentially really good value. And I think that squad you're looking at on screen now, so Raya, Gabriel, Trent, Vardio, Diaz, Mbeumo, Semenyo, Rodgers, Saka, Wood, Calvert-Lewin, Haaland, that is a good cliche but balanced squad. I don't think there's a huge amount wrong with that. And then if later on things go wrong, I really need to get Solanke, I can obviously just reverse those moves. Vardio down to a 4.5, Chris Wood up to Solanke, and it lets me keep that Luis Diaz spot. I mean, it could still even be Bruno Fernandes if I wanted to. He could go back in. I can still afford it. So I think that's what I'm going to be mostly thinking about, today, tomorrow, probably right up until the deadline on Saturday, is whether or not I go all out to try and get Vardio in. Because I would like a Man City defender, and I'm not sure I'm prepared to risk Rico Lewis. But then you could argue the other way. You start with Lewis and Solanke. If it goes wrong, you do Solanke to Wood, and then Lewis up to Vardio. But I think in terms of safety, having a solid squad, the Vardio and Chris Wood one is better, for sure. And then I just react to things that come, or I focus on fixtures later on. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Just to confirm, Raya pretty much a lock, depending on what happens on Friday's press conference. Gabriel a lock, Trent close, Saka a lock, Rodgers definitely in, and Burmo definitely in, and then Calvert-Lewin and Haaland. Everyone else I'm going to play around with, and I'm finding it difficult. I really am. There's lots of options, and it's almost easier when the team just picks itself. It's not doing that this year, and that is a good thing overall. I'm leaving it there. If you've got this far, fair play to you. Make sure to give it a 5-star rating on podcast. Like, subscribe, check out Fantasy Football Hub using the links in the description below, and I'll be back tomorrow for final thoughts.